So I'm here with Elovet. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, it's Elovet.
Cool.
Yeah, Elovet.
Cool. I was hoping I was saying it right.
Yeah.
So, just for anyone that might be listening that doesn't know your history, or for anyone who knows you but doesn't know your history, can you give just like a little background of kind of like when you started making music and how that all began?
Ooh, okay. I the first time I recorded music to release possibly was August of last year. Um, it was I spent 10 days kind of like in solitude, and I put together an EP. But I'd always dabbled in music for like my entire life. I went between. I played violin for a while. I played some piano. You
Mm.
know,
Were you in band?
I wasn't in band. I actually,
Orchestra?
no, I wasn't in
Ooh.
band. I wasn't in orchestra. I didn't sing in the choir. I actually remember at a young age, like my parents wanted me to be in the church choir, and I was like, I don't think that's really my thing. Like, I don't know if that's really it. Um, and so I always kind of did it sporadically on and off for
Mm.
years. Tried to learn guitar for a while, like that kind of thing. Um, and it wasn't until I guess college I tried to start a band,
Mm.
and it fell apart. It was a great lineup. It was a great band. I put together some really good people,
Mm.
and it just didn't happen. And then Elovet came around in August.
So that's pretty surprising that you weren't in choir or something like that because you're very comfortable using your voice. I feel like a lot of electronic artists aren't really comfortable using their own voice or like a
Yeah.
non-sampled voice.
Yeah,
Like they just kind of resort to instrumentalism.
with samples chopped in and
Yeah, just kind of as an inevitability. Um,
I don't know. I've grown more comfortable with my voice,
mhm.
and I'm still growing more comfortable with my voice. And I kind of think that the human voice is capable of so many things. If you don't have any instruments, you can make sounds with your mouth. You can beatbox. You can do different things to make instruments and layer those together. And I don't know. I think from the beginning of me really experimenting with it, and the different programs I was using and recording and layering, I always knew that I was going to use my voice in some way. I didn't know if I was going to just be talking over an instrumental, or if I was going to be rapping or singing or what. And it kind of turned out that I do a little bit of all of that. I just kind of even sometimes use my own voice as a sample in the background
Mhm.
of a song. It'd be an instrumental, and then my voice buried somewhere in an instrumental, and then the actual vocals over top. And yeah, I don't really know how that came to be, but in a way, I'm glad it did.
I mean, is it the kind of thing where the more saturated you are with your own voice, the kind of less it starts to bother you? Because that's kind of how that's what my progression has been.
Yeah.
Like I've always been really uncomfortable with my voice,
Uh huh.
but I've always worked in like broadcasting in different mediums
Yeah.
and just kind of now I'm just used to it, and now I'm just like, okay,
You're
I
like,
guess
oh, it's
I
my
guess it sounds
voice.
like that. Like, okay, whatever. I get one. This is it.
I mean, I guess maybe a little bit of that, but also, I remember when I first started recording things, it was very specifically these separate voices. So one track is very specifically like Elovet's rapping, like this is rap, and then this is Elovet is doing this, and so then it was like, well, someone was like, let those voices talk to each other, like have them all communicating at once. And so then that's where you start getting tracks where you have, maybe it's me harmonizing mixed in with the instrumental, and then it's another voice that's kind of singing like a bit of a hook, and then it's another voice coming in a little over top of that that's maybe rapping, and those are this kind of layers and textures that it builds that kind of build interest, and then kind of allows me to bury what I fear is my voice sounding weird in that somewhere, and they kind of communicate and make something that sounds nice.
So, do you feel like you kind of hide yourself in your work? Because like something that one of the first things that I thought about, and obviously this is like self motivated from just what I go through is I caught on the thread of kind of like depression and melancholy
Mm.
as being something that you refer to a lot, and I mean, is that present as a way to kind of like find strength
Um,
in that kind of state rather than being held down by it, or is it just kind of you
I
know
like just like kind of sad boy music.
Well,
Like
yeah, or just kind of,
no,
I'm sad, so I'm gonna make sad music. Kind
yeah,
of like.
I don't know. I mean, there is a good air of melancholy, I think, in a lot of the music,
Mm-hmm.
but I consider it more moody than just depressed and melancholy, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think a lot of times if an artist says that they've never experienced any form of a depression or melancholy, then it's kind of for me hard to believe because I've experienced a lot of it, and of course that comes through my music because my music I try to be as honest as possible in everything that's there, and so if I'm feeling down and I need to work through it, then it comes out in my music, you know. But I do believe in finding the strength in that and like
Mm-hmm.
working through that and realizing that just because I'm down, just because I'm, like you said, depressed or melancholy, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean I have to stay that way. It doesn't mean that this has to kill me or suffocate me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I deal a lot with duality and in my personality and in my music, where it's just kind of this thing where what is expected, what do you want to be, what can you do, what can't you do, and so I feel like that's the same way that I try to deal with emotions sometimes because there's like you wouldn't know happiness if you never knew great sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you never talk about the great sadness, then how can you sit around and talk about how happy you are all the time? And so I try to balance it as best I can. And I think I'm getting to more and more happy music eventually,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, Elovet was born in turmoil. And so it kind of has saturated the music in a way.
What do you mean by it was born in turmoil?
That those 10 days when I first made the first EP was kind of me like escaping. Like I was going through a lot in my personal life and I was kind of in like, I guess a little bit of a dark place, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I just need to get away from this. And I had an opportunity to go somewhere and kind of be alone for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I had originally planned on, working on a different project. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like, as soon as I got there, the first night I pulled out the music and started working. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. Instead of, burying or distracting myself from these emotions with something else, I'm going to face them head on and
Mm-hmm.
create art out of them, create this music that talks about these feelings I'm dealing with and gives me a focus instead of me just kind of wallowing in this and just kind of like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, completely erasing it in a weird way. It kind of is a record of my like emotional exorcism during these 10 days, I guess.
So, when you say record, do you mean like it is a preservation of a kind of like past situation, or is it more
No,
aspirational than that?
it's more aspirational than that. It's also it's one of those things. I knew this guy when I was in high school, and I was probably a freshman or a sophomore, and he was an upperclassman, and we were both visual artists, and he had this sketchbook, and it was probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. It was like full of these like ghastly creatures and these like horrible like gory images, but they were all really beautifully done. They were all drawn in a really skilled way. And I remember asking him like, why do you draw these horrible things? Like, what is with all this scary stuff in this sketchbook? And he was like, I have horrible nightmares. I have night terrors. I have these demons basically that eat me alive. And he was like, and I draw them. I draw these things and I trap them in this book. And by drawing them and putting them here, they no longer have power over me. I'm now in control. I have power over them. And this isn't to that extreme, but in a way, it's similar. If you take something that is a hardship and turn it into a triumph, then it becomes a little bit more of a victory for you as a person. It becomes something that I think is easier to deal with, and work through.
I mean, for sure. I just like am always concerned that it's, I don't know, with something like that specifically, that it's like surrounding yourself with the same things that are like
Mm,
upsetting you or like bringing you into this to begin with. Like,
mm,
how do you keep it aspirational? How do you keep it more kind of like
yeah.
upbeat? And like, I don't want to say optimistic necessarily because that has like weird kind of
No,
connotations, but you know what I mean?
I get
Like,
what you're saying. I think that it's all about leaving it there. It's all about taking it and letting it live in that space and not carrying it on with you. After, like I said, I went into that first project and was feeling really down, and by the end of it, it was cathartic. It was like I had gone into one massive therapy session of a sort, which I mean
Mm,
doesn't work for everyone. I'm not saying that that's normal or that's the way everyone processes everything, but
mm-hmm.
for me it was kind of cathartic, and you always have to keep that hope in mind. Keep the hope that like there's something better coming, kind of a thing.
Mm,
And I think that it's not always exactly optimism or just like a positive outlook, but believing that like silver lining or like storms pass. Like things aren't always dark and cloudy.
mm.
There's a sunshine later on. The rainbow at the end of the rain, like that kind of thing. And so I always try to keep that hope in mind.
So that's more of a life experience thing, or that's more of something that your kind of work has um, proven to kind of endear itself to, like
Maybe a little bit of both.
that your work like uplifts itself almost, you know?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think that I try my best not to leave any of my projects, any of my releases on a sour note.
Mm-hmm.
I like to end them with like some sort of a positive message in them. I think literally the last lines in Rift, that entire project, are we can have a utopia, we can love each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ending a project, even if has all these up and downs and all these like trials and tribulations, all these like it has these like bright moments and these like cloudy moments and these storms and these like sunshine. If you end it in a way that's hopeful and positive, has a good outlook for what's to come, then like that's kind of a happy ending. It's a bow. It's a nice thing to look at the end of all of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of like a really more sincere kind of view of like your own work than I feel like a lot of folks here have. A lot more like introspective. It's a lot more like listen to it in the middle of the night kind of music.
Yeah, yeah. Someone told me once, they said, this is music that you share with your friends, and this is
Mm-hmm.
like your alone time music. Which, of course, everyone wants to make a song that's the life of the party. Everyone wants to show up with your music setup and like
Mm-hmm.
switch on the first track and everyone, jump up and go crazy. But um, that's not quite what I do. And I can't do something dishonest. And so right now, I have yet to sit down in front of, my equipment and be like, I'm gonna make a club banger. I'm gonna make something that's gonna make everyone want to jump up and dance.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that in a way is my truth, and that's me being truthful in that. And so that's why the music hasn't been that yet. One day I might sit down and be like, I got this groovy beat in my head, and I'm gonna throw some like really funky dance stuff over it, and it's gonna be great. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not quite what has happened with Elovet yet.
So it's definitely more of a reflection of yourself than of the surroundings.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that an artist's art has to be some sort of reflection of them and their environment and what their life is like and what they're going through.
Yeah, it's like a combination.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the stuff is conceptual, and it's not like directly immediately based on my life, but then once you really get into it, there is some of me in it because it's unavoidable. It's how do you as a creator separate yourself entirely from your creation? If I paint a painting and you paint a painting, there's evidence of the two of our different works. There was what was it, Monet and Renoir went on a trip together, and they were looking at the same things, painting the same things. It's a series of paintings. They went to, I think, it was this place where the upper class would go on vacation, and they're painting all these people, and you can see, which one's Monet, which one's Renoir because of what they're focusing on, because of the brushstrokes, because of the color palette, but they're looking at the same things, and I think that's the way that music is. That's the way all art is, because if I create a song and someone else tries to create a song that's almost the same thing, it's going to almost be the same thing because we have different voices, we have different visions, we have different souls,
Yeah, and yours is definitely distinct. Like yours definitely different from the Savannah party vibe and the Savannah grungy vibe and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
For sure. But thank you so much for talking to me tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's cold and dark. sit inside and try to find warmth.